really hot day in California. These October days sometimes are extremely hot, and today promises to be one such day. Do we have news or do we have news? We have a lot of breaking items today. The first one being the behavior of social media. We first start out with the letter that Missouri senator has written to Facebook. We highlighted this, Josh Hawley. We highlighted this in our preview yesterday. Sridhar ji, what can you tell us about this? What led to this letter being written to Facebook?
I think it has been brewing for quite some time. The whole concept of the content editors and content adjudicators, and the concept of what you call testing the fairness of the stories by the so-called independent and objective third parties. At the heart of the issue is suddenly yesterday a New York Post article which shows emails between the Ukrainian Tsar and Hunter Biden being revealed. The article featured that there was introductions and there was some kind of personal favors that seemed to have been extended in via the exchange of these emails. That the contents are still a little bit unclear. That story was published in New York Post when the Republican, from senators to followers to people, attempted to post. They suddenly found Facebook and Twitter kind of had blocked posting that. That sent furor right across the market and amongst people. I mean, what kind of pedigree that these fellows have in randomly and arbitrarily targeting people and making. This has been going on in India. Many Indians will tell you the kind of ubiquitous power that the tech giants enjoy and their application of the power. Another news story that is making news today, right now as we speak, is that it looks like, based on some federal investigations in New York, some Twitter workers temporary workers post themselves as permanent, seems to have had access to various tools, and whether that could have compromised the usability of the platform remains uncertain, and that also is being investigated. Now, on top of that, Jack Dorsey is saying whether they were hasty and rushed in blocking this without due investigation will add further fuel to the fire as the day progresses. So in summary, are these tools, are these platforms today relevant, or they have emerged as extended judiciary or extended political czars who can preach and write and do anything to influence the minds of the people is a very big question. That prompted Howley to say, it's time we summon these guys and do a complete investigation in the Judiciary Committee.
Now it is a little close to election. Tempers are fraying. Tempers are running hot. How does this impact the election itself? Because messaging today, because the president or the challenger cannot travel much, they cannot meet the crowds, and if the media outlets are going to, even by mistake, suppress vital news stories, how is it going to help? By the way, sir, I also saw one very hard-hitting 6-minute message by Donald Trump Jr. about Hunter Biden. What do you make of that one, sir?
Well, I think that we are in the political theater right now. So let me first respond to Don Trump Jr. Don Trump Jr. is quite clear and explicit in making his case, which is to say, the Democrats have engaged in this game of investigation. They had Russian scandal, they had influence of elections, they had tax issues on Trump. Okay, if it's not one issue, they jump to another issue, right? Now, there's a point to which you got to say, okay, it's over, now let's fight the elections, people are aware. It's not the case, right? It's not the case. It's about every opportunity to throw more pain to see how you can influence and persuade. And then you will find that it's not only the message that, he's leading by 12 points. You can always, the polls. The polls can be calibrated and the samples can be highly skewed in terms of objectively communicating what really the pulse of the people is. So therefore, to me, the Biden video by on Biden, the video by Donald Trump, plus the events that are happening today, is because there is no guarantee that the adjacent channels, not the main media, the adjacent channels, namely Facebook and Twitter, which are very important, as you point out, in the context of people being unable to travel, you need a mechanism to get the message across. That's about the Biden part. That is what the Donald Trump video.
Now, I haven't seen any response back from Hunter Biden about all these allegations yet, because this video has been doing the rounds for a few days, maybe. Now, why do you think they're preferring to just keep quiet? Because sometimes what happens is silence is assent, which means that they are saying, yes, these things indeed did happen. What are your thoughts from the Democratic camp, sir? What is going on there?
That isn't that the whole policy of the? It's almost like, use the mask to hide behind the lack of kind of communication of Joe Biden, right? What has he communicated? He has been this is one of the most kind of asymmetric campaigns, right? Speak less, okay? Look at and hold your hands and engage in what you call as vote by default. You speak less, therefore, that means you haven't uttered anything controversial. That seems to be the case. So that's the Democratic Party strategy, which is to say, either deny or quiet. Seems to be the approach. That's all one can say, right? This was picked up in the debate by Trump and Biden. I think Trump pushed him on this, but he basically denied it in the only meeting that's occurred thus far.
In fact, some of the exchanges were downright like something that you would have on a street brawl. At some point, I think Joseph Biden said, told the moderator, "Will you ask this clown to stop?" And I was like, wow, we're talking about the President of the United States. It seemed like a real fish market brawl. But moving on, sir, globally, the COVID virus seems to be making a strong comeback. We are seeing night curfews in Paris. And is this because of temperatures cooling down, the after effect, or is there anything that changed?
You see, I think either the data is very skeptical or the data is absent. One of the two things that you observe. Now, whether there is, some people say there are different strains. This is not that strain of virus. This is different strain of virus. So therefore, that's one facet. The second facet is that, as is being predicted by at least in US doctors, that one could see spurt in cases when with the onset of the fall and the winter, because that's the virus season in many cold countries. So it is conceivable that this thing breeds very well. If it was dormant, breeds in this type of environment. It's possible that's the case. Well, as you said, in most of the situation is now happening in not only in the cold countries in the northern hemisphere, but also happening in the southern hemisphere. So if you come along, from London to Paris to Holland to Spain to Italy, and now coming into United States, right? You find the increase in the cases. Then you go down to Asia. Indonesia is reporting higher cases. Singapore has reported cases. The Qingdao province in China is saying, please stop this, clusters, because it's accelerating. So there is a lot of incomplete data. But one thing is certain, that this has not gone away. That's just the truth. And the vaccines being stopped is not helping the case either.
Yes, indeed. And it should be mentioned here that Johnson & Johnson and one other company, I don't remember which one, perhaps you can jog my memory. Eli Lilly have stopped testing their vaccine because their results were not satisfactory. So we have to find out if it's going to be a complete reset, that they'll have to go back to the drawing board to do the vaccine.
And too. The Russian Sputnik as well, they have stopped. Their trials are now postponed to next year.
Okay, so essentially now the possibility that a vaccine will come this year is non-existent. perhaps, and we have to see how people will cope with it. I know that ashwagandha, I'm just making a mention here, ashwagandha and Ayurvedic medicine has been found to be beneficial. And we also would like to say that vitamin A and D are good builds good immunity within your body. Use it as advised. Beyond that, it's still kind of three blind men in a room trying to feel an elephant and trying to describe what they see. But at any rate, moving on to economy, Steve Mnuchin has made a strong statement, and what do you make of it, sir? This is the first time I'm seeing Mnuchin, who's been a very, very careful with his words, make such a statement.
Well, it's very unusual for for a treasurer, who's kind of politically neutral, if I have to use the word, to come out and make a very profound statement. He made two things. One, he said he's very satisfied with his boss and the work that he is doing, and he also said that he will be very satisfied to come back and continue the job when his boss is back in power. That quite is explicit in terms of an endorsement on two fronts. One on the leadership, two on the policies that he's putting into place that is being endorsed by his leader, right? Contrary to I'm a firm believer in both the economic as well as the market-friendly policies of President Trump, right? So, I mean, I'm making it quite explicit, but for it to state, for the person to state that is a telling endorsement contrary to all the kind of nonsensical rhetoric that is going on in United States.
Yes, indeed. And let's take a quick look at India and IMF projections for India. How do you see the numbers that IMF is putting out for India for the fiscal year 2021-2022, sir?
Yeah. So myself and Mohandas Pai, we had a hot exchange of issues with the Q2 projections, right? The Q2 projection stated, India had the worst GDP relative to the world, and people were predicting doomsday for India, that India is going to collapse. So we asked the question, is India going to go from 3 or 2.9 trillion to 50 billion, 60 billion with 90% contraction? Nobody answered that question, right? Including the IMF chief economist was kind of, asked the question to clarify, right? Which is when you say the contraction. Now they have come back and restated or stated that the contraction for all of 2021, I think Indian financial year finishes on March 31st of the following year. So for 2021, the contraction would be around 10% or 11% or minus 10%, or growth will be negative 10%, right? And 21-22 will rebound with a strong 8.8%. That's a phenomenal kind of a growth consistent with those who have put close to 10% or between 8 to 10% stimulus early into the economic system. India is also put something very close to that number. Of course, United States topped the list with 10% and gaining more when the next stimulus comes in, right? So those who put stimulus early and in large numbers are beginning to feel the positive effects of that as the economy comes out, right? So therefore, it's not a doom, and it augurs very well for the future prospects of Indian economy.
Lastly, we'll take a look at the markets and Sridharji, we have 1 minute left in our show today. If you could quickly wrap up who's doing well, who's not doing well, and why are some doing well?
Well, I think that to quickly wrap up the markets reflect the sentiments of what the economic outlook and stimulus is. They're carrying the same. So in other words, the markets have been very tepid for the past 2 days, having seen the spurt and growth on the back of JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs income. But having said that, there are others, like Wells Fargo, for that matter, or some of the other companies who have reported earnings, but not earnings consistent with what you would expect. So there's still kind of reserves and provisions. So what this points out to is, notwithstanding the fact favorable economic conditions, those who can manage the rigors of the business very well. Amazon is an example. right? 43% increase in sales, right? Those who can manage the business well have been able to leverage the tools that were offered to them, both stimulus as well as the interest rate in manage, and then of course the customer behavior. They have done well, and that will be the case. But markets are going to be driven by stimulus and stimulus only because we are in pandemic. And just to give a concluding note to link the market, and we're 1 minute ahead, the Fed chairwoman of San Francisco has stated we are very well organized in terms of the fiscal tools and the monetary tools to contain and manage the pandemic. Hence, we were upfront and making interest rates to be 0%. So I think rest of the world should shy away from this notion borrowing is bad, right? When the interest rates are 0, that's the time you borrow, not when interest rate is 2% or 3%.
And that's about does it for us today, folks. And we'll be back tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. IST, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for joining us. And as always, please subscribe to PGurus channel. Thank you very much and namaskaram, Sridhar Chityalaji.
Namaskaram.